Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the BrainFood Show. We are making these on the regular lately. I am slightly surprised, also pleased. It's happening. This is Medieval Times Part 5, because what we wanted to do is we'll not make episodes for ages, and then we'll come back with 5 episodes covering the same topic, because, well, we want to appeal to everyone, and clearly, we're marketing geniuses.
Yep.
How's it going?
The show grew a lot.
This is the last one, though, right?
Yeah, this is the last one in this series. The show grew a lot, though. Every time we would come back, it would be like way more popular than before.
I mean, it's weird that whenever we make episodes, more people watch. I mean, I would never have expected this.
Yeah.
Ever. That's my attempt at sarcasm. This is the last medieval one, right?
It is.
Because I mean, I don't want to say that I'm sick of it, because that's obviously bad for. You know, bad.
Yeah.
You don't want to start your show being like, just a heads up. This one is the same stuff as before. No, I like it. I also like some variety in my life. But
we got some variety coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited about variety. What have we got next week, or whenever we next release?
Yeah.
Are you ready to say? Do you know yet? I think I feel like you told me. So either you don't want to say, you want to keep it secret, so it must be extra good,
or the fact that we're going to record it in about an hour and a half, and I just covered it and I'm completely blanking on even what it's about. Oh wait, I got it.
Wow, dude, you want to get checked for that? Maybe you should get one of those apps that trains your brain. You know?
Yeah. It is on the origin of everyday things, and it is going to be chopsticks, spoons, forks, knives. Yeah, and whatnot.
Now you might be thinking, Simon just asked Daven for, podcast banter. No, Simon asked Daven because he also totally forgot, even though he'd been told 5 minutes ago what it was about.
Literally, we just talked about it and we both forgot.
Yeah. I like that. I recently, and I think I even brought up that I recently made a Business Blaze video about forks, which, obviously that's a really strong reason to go and subscribe to that channel, because everyone loves a bit of fork talk. But they were the tools of the devil or something. And God gave, people were like, God gave you perfectly good hands for eating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as a huge fan of KFC, I'd agree.
Yeah. And going back to the other thing, it is kind of funny, though, with because we both forget what we've just covered like 5 seconds before.
Oh my God, dude.
It is amazing.
You asked me what I recorded on videos last week. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Tell me about this person's life. I'll be like, I don't know, they're a soldier maybe. Right.
Yeah. Well, it is amazing because I've just spent the day going over this. And I can't even remember what it's going to be on. But then once we get started, it's just right there somehow.
It's all there. It's all there.
Somehow.
It's the same like when I watch a video later. I'll be like, I remember everything about this. But if you quizzed me on it, it'd be like, this is crazy. But also, like, imagine preparing for exams, like university or whatever, or school. It's like you never just read the book and you're like, ready. Yeah. It's always you got to read the book like 17 times and then write it down again and then make some mind map or some shit. Yeah. I'm like, people are like, you don't remember this? I'm like, obviously not. When was the last time you read a book and remembered every damn detail?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, should we get on?
Yeah,
start us with that appetizer. I'm eventually coming around to calling it the names you've declared it as.
And don't forget, everyone, go rate or review the podcast for a chance to win $1,000. Review it anywhere.
Oh God, you're doing my job for me. I think. Look at this.
I didn't put it in the notes
show
this
up,
time.
I do my stuff and then. I need. Dude, look. Most of my stuff is I'm reading off a teleprompter. I'm utterly incompetent unless I have assistance. Like it has to be literally written down in front of me for me to be able to do anything.
The funny thing about that is you do a really good job on that Business Blaze of sort of like ad-libbing on the fly, and that is so hard to do when talking to a camera. Like when talking, I could be like talking to you and telling you about something and just like go through it like really nicely, but then like when you're trying to ad-lib in front of the camera, it's just like your brain just is like, nope, I'm not talking to a person. I need a script. Like
I just have a cardboard cutout of Worf from Star Trek. And I pretend no, not really. I'm just kidding. But
that would be
this
funny.
is something I consider, especially at the beginning, because I wondered how I was going to do the show. Yeah. And I was like, I'll keep this super brief, I know, because people want stuff about medieval stuff.
Yeah.
I was wondering how I'm going to do the show, because it is hard to talk to a camera like that.
It is.
And I was like, okay, I'll print out a picture of a face and put it there. But eventually I just got okayed it, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this
just get
works out
comfortable.
fine. Just pretend
Well,
there's a
'cause
person there.
It is kind of funny because if you see it in isolation, if people didn't know about a camera or anything, you're just some guy standing in a room in your basement ranting to yourself.
Literally shouting at the
yeah,
stuff,
like shouting, like it looks like you're a crazy person.
Oh, my neighbors must think I'm insane. There's a. It was the office next to mine was empty for the longest time, and now it's opened up as a shop that sells like comic books and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So I'm like, there's definitely going to be people in there, and they're going to be like buying comic books, and they're just going to hear some guy next door like randomly shouting like "Silence infidel" or something. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Someone's going to call the police eventually.
Yeah. So appetizer for.
Oh my god, a friend of mine. Sorry, I know. I'm sorry. I have to tell you a story.
Okay.
A friend of mine was coming home from the shops, like the mall, and he lives right next door to it. And he's coming home with his daughter, who was having an absolute fit, just going mad, like just having one of these. I think she's like 4 years old, 3 years old, just having an absolute tantrum.
Yeah.
And he takes her home, and he's like, "Wife, help, please!" And the police show up at his door.
Oh.
And yeah. And they're just, "Hello there. We just want to make sure that you have a daughter, and we'd like to see her." And because they were like, someone had called the police just in case she was being kidnapped. And I was like, one, that's intense. And two, I'm glad. I was like, that's pretty great. Like, there's someone actually called the cops on like this because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
that was crazy. Sorry, let's do some show.
Let's jump in. So appetizer today. So chastity belts are like a thing in like popular entertainment, but were they actually ever a thing worn by like women or men, or really women is the stereotype there in medieval
I
times?
don't know what you're up to, but
When her knightly man was off like
medieval
raping,
times.
murdering, and pillaging for profit and fun. So was this ever actually a thing? It turns out, or at least ever actually a thing in medieval time, I should say. It turns out, no, it does not appear so. So it would appear that the actual popularity of the chastity belts and sort of the myth came about in the 18th to 19th century, thanks to the obsession with like masturbation as a societal ill. And so there's some speculation that women wore it in the workplace, like in the Industrial Revolution and everything, to protect themselves, but that isn't actually really clear totally, or to what extent, if it was the case. That said,
bringing this back to forks, why did they think it was sinful? I mean, God gave you perfectly good hands.
yeah, totally. We're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that in detail and some funny things. But so yeah, that said, there was, if you go back to the late medieval period, that is the first known depiction of a chastity belt-like device. It was in Conrad Kaiser's 1405 book.
Kaiser. Let's call him Kaiser.
Yeah, let's go with that. Military technology, his book on military technology called Bellefortis. And in the book, Kaiser writes about and draws various things like battering rams, crossbows, instruments of torture, mentions how to castrate a man. And then also, not like totally related to war, but kind of tangentially, merely to soldiers' pastimes, he described a female chastity device. And this was drawn by Kaiser and had some accompanying text that stated,
"These are hard iron breeches of Florentine women, which are closed at the front."
Yeah, so he goes on to state in a sort of ironic tone,
"Padlocks unto the four-legged creatures, breeches unto the women of Florence. A joke binds this lovely series together. I recommend them to the noble and obedient youth." Wait, what's going on a four-legged creature? What's going on?
Padlocks, I'm not sure. And he's joking around here, basically. And so given that sort of the tongue-in-cheek nature of this, it's generally thought he was really just sort of making fun of Florentine women or talking about how they're really hard to sleep with, rather than actually something that they physically wore or anything like that. So that's generally thought what this was. He was just joking around. That said, several poems of the era do refer to chastity belts, but they don't talk about like these locking devices. They talk about either just strips of cloth, like just kind of like, a special underwear or whatever. That's more like a sort of like a promise ring, like I'm going to wear this while you're gone, like this cloth is sort of, I'm not going to sleep with anyone else while you're gone, type of thing. Or so just sort of a symbolic thing. And that said,
wait, so what's that ring? Isn't there a ring that people wear I feel like this is definitely an American thing that I've just heard about in movies. That is like a thing that people wear, saying that they're not gonna have sex until they get married. Is that a promise ring, or is that like you're promising yourself? Wait, what's a promise ring?
I should know that, but actually, maybe.
You're my resident American. You're who I have to go to ask these questions.
Well,
so
see, I was
in
thinking
TV
in my
shows.
mind, promise ring was one thing, but now that you're saying that, I kind of think that maybe you're right.
Oh, sweet.
Let's do a quick.
It doesn't matter. This really is like off topic. I was just curious. Are you Googling it?
Yes. And a promise for an. Okay, so it's that. I was going to say it was a promise to get engaged in the future, sort of like a pre-engagement.
Well,
ring.
that's an engagement
But
ring.
you are correct that it also signifies I'm going to stay monogamous, and or I'm going to stay. What is it? Just commitment to monogamous? Oh no, it's a purity ring that is the signify a pledge of sexual abstinence until marriage. So yeah, all right then.
Yeah, no, I have none of those.
Yeah, all right
I
then.
don't believe in it.
It's also an American emo band from Milwaukee.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting choice for an emo band, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
So where were we? So yeah. Also, so the medieval period is generally thought to end around the end of the 15th century, but there are paintings and drawings from the 15th and 16th century showing women wearing metal chastity belts, and even, but noteworthy here in these, they often also have like padlocks on their tongues and stuff, which obviously is not something anyone actually did with the tongue part. So it's generally thought that these were just sort of, just fictional narrative things. And they do appear in fictional narrative stuff of like jealous husbands, locking up their wives with these things. But like, obviously, for the practicality sake of it and the way they're depicted here, it's just metal against skin, which is not going to, for an extended period, that's not going to work, especially for women. It's really not going to work out for you, and you're going to get like infection and all that. It's generally thought that this wasn't really a thing. So when did the first verifiable chastity belt come about? And so you'll often hear that it first appeared in 1388, owned by Francesco di Carrara II, the Lord of, Padua, the oldest city in northern.
That is what I often hear.
Yeah, often in conversation.
Yeah.
So the belt was supposedly designed for his presumably his wife, and it's on display at the Doge's Palace in Venice, and supposedly from this era. But the problem is why most historians don't think this one's quite accurate is because there's a lot of chastity belts supposedly from the medieval period that have since been shown to have not been when they do dating and stuff on them. And this one is just thought to help. It's not really known when this one showed up either in the collection or how it got there. And it's just thought it was probably just to vilify him as a supposed tyrant, because that was sort of a thing in popular history to sort of keep that going. And so to sum up on this one, there was a good read. I didn't read the whole thing, but part of it. Albert Clausen's book, The Medieval Chastity Belt, A Myth-Making Process. He sums up the whole thing on this one.
Older studies of the history of Padua yield the same results and confirm that the identification of Francisco II as the inventor of the chastity belt was a myth, though a highly successful and long-reaching one.
See, and when I was reading it, I was wanting to include this is the summation, but there's actually reasons, but it's not like a smoking gun reason. It's just like this. He's got this whole chapter on this part that's just sort of all kind of leans it towards that. So, and I thought it would be too boring to include the whole thing, so I just did the summation there.
Good decision.
Yeah. That said, there's lots of prominent museums who, for a time, and some still do, have medieval chastity belts on display. But yeah, like I said, when they start doing dating on the metal, not so much. For instance, there's one of the chastity belts housed at the National Museum of the Middle Ages in Paris. Was long thought to be belonged to Catherine de Medici, and labeled in the 15th century. But then in the 1990s, they dated it, and it turns out it was from the early 19th century. Actually, is when it was made.
Carbon dating's so cool.
Yeah.
I think we've discussed this before. But it's like all of this stuff that everyone was sure about, all of these archaeologists thinking they're so smart. And then these future archaeologists comes along and he's like, yeah, it turns out most of that was wrong.
We have better tools.
Sorry, guys.
That's if you want to read any interesting fact books or stuff like that from basically before around 2005 to 2010 is when they started to get good, but it was like it was basically when Google started to get really good and the internet started to be like super popular in like as the 2000s sort of progressed, that early time. Then the interesting fact thing started to get really accurate, because you have these tools of, like, like you start to have the tools like to search old like newspapers and old documents and stuff, like books, and they just didn't have these tools. And so you look at like the older stuff, interesting fact, is so wildly inaccurate. And it's not, I mean, they had to like go down to the library, and they didn't have like these, like every book, scanned and searchable and, whatnot. So
yeah, so it's like, you'd read a fact on Google and be like, I guess it's true, I can't possibly disprove that. And then the top 2 pages of Google are all repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, now there's like Google Scholar and Google Books and all of this, archives.
Yeah.
It's so easy to search.
Yeah.
When you search on Google Books, and it's just like, yeah, well, we found this entry on page 237 of the second edition of this book from like 1942. You're like, what is going on?
And the same, like the British Archives is really, you can like search all the like court records in like British history, and they have so many of them just scanned there and searchable. And that is so handy when looking up British history stuff. And yeah.
Do you remember we used to have Ancestry as a sponsor on, I think it was Today I Found Out. Dude, this was so cool. And they gave me like free access. And I was like going through, the records are crazy. Like I got back like many, many generations, and you're just looking through like old wedding certificates from like 1920. And I'm like, oh, my great grandparents got married on this day. And you're like, that is wild.
Yeah, and like
it's just wild.
Yeah, same like searching for graves, like,
and their signatures and, like, from the
oh, that's crazy. Yeah. No, yeah,
it's wild.
Yeah, the tool's available. The one sort of exception I will say is Cecil Adams, I think it is.
Straight dope.
Really accurate
really
accurate for the tools. Not he, it's probably like a team or whatever, but that they had available. Really super accurate. Now granted, they were doing like one piece a week or whatever for the newspaper, and probably like a whole team of people, and journalism background and everything like
when
that.
When did Snopes kick off? That was also back in the day, right?
Yeah, and that was at least back in the day used to be considered super accurate. I don't know. Every time I mention Snopes now, everyone's like, "Oh, that one's so inaccurate." And I'm like, "That's never been my experience with them."
Oh.
But maybe now. I don't know. I don't really come across their stuff too much anymore in researching. So I don't know if their Google search thing isn't or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe they're not accurate anymore. I don't know. But they used to be. At least that was always my impression.
Yeah, I remember like Straight Dope and Snopes from like these were some of the earliest websites I remember. Enjoying.
Yeah,
back in the
Snopes was one of the
late 90s.
Snopes was one of the best there in the early going. So in any event, so where were we? So yeah,
now you got the BrainFood Show.
Yeah, right.
For that.
Yeah,
totally. Today I Found Out.
Yeah, very accurate. So Victorian era is when it actually seems to be that chastity belts sort of had their heyday, other than like modern times, which are arguably more popular now than ever in history. And as
the internet,
right, and as mentioned, is to prevent masturbation in the Victorian, and it was used as sort of like a medical device, like it could be like doctor recommended for a youth who couldn't, keep their hands off themselves or whatever. So, and they actually got around the metal on skin problem here by the Victorian era chastity belts typically had like leather or some sort of padded soft covering underneath. To sort of help with,
I'm imagining some sort of steampunky chastity belt right now.
Yeah, but and also they didn't just leave it on like all the time, like the depiction of like the woman who has to wear it like the whole time, and like like there's someone who has a key to take it off sometimes, but so these the cloth or leather or whatever would be changed a lot or whatever. So example. So just to talk about this societal evil of the masturbation. So there's a book, 1853 book entitled The Silent Friend, gives an example of one LD and what happened to him due to his constant masturbation.
He less resembled a living creature than a corpse, lying upon straw, meagre, pale, and filthy, casting forth an infectious stench, almost incapable of motion, a watery, palish blood issuing from the nose, the tongue frightfully swelling, and the saliva constantly frothing in his mouth. The discovery of the mind was equal to the body. It sounds more like he had rabies rather than...
Yeah, exactly. And in a medical text, a few decades later, it said that you should...
Teach your boy that when he handles or excites the sexual organs, all parts of the body suffer. This is why it is called self-abuse. The skin is terrible and is, in fact, the sin is terrible. Sorry, I thought it was making his skin terrible, which, based on this kind of stuff, you might well believe. Yeah. The sin is terrible and is, in fact, worse than lying or stealing. For although these are wicked and will ruin the soul, self-abuse will ruin the soul and body. The loathsome habit lays the foundation for consumption. It's tuberculosis. Paralysis and heart disease. It makes many boys lose their minds. Others, when grown, commit suicide. I love this. Yeah, so the only thing they're missing is it. I don't know if you were told, it was like the joke that it causes blindness.
Yeah, that was like
This was always, okay, yeah.
So that also, a few centuries before that, just one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther, the famed
that guy.
priest. Yes, he has so many good ones. I was actually going to include a whole aside on this, but I decided not to because it's already really long, this episode.
Oh, I know this quote.
Yeah, this quote, he has so many good quotes about all sorts of things. He had we have that episode called like Martin Luther's potty mouth, and he was just like, swore like a sailor, like in just everything. He just compared everything. Like it's such a contrast to like a modern day priest. Like when you just look at how he wrote his sermons and stuff, it was quite entertaining. He used to have these things where he's like pooping on the devil and stuff like that and just describing.
See, I'd be much more into religion if that was,
it's really funny.
The priest was telling,
it's really
be into that.
His analogies and things like this and the things. But anyways, this is one of his quotes. So he's talking about how he's basically talking about how the Catholic Church was sort of encouraging the sin of masturbation by, requiring all the clergy to be celibate and everything. So as he states,
nature never... Excuse me. I was getting too dramatic. Nature never lets up. We're all driven to the secret sin. To say it crudely but honestly, if it doesn't go into a woman, it goes into your shirt. Oh, Martin Luther.
That's great. So people should go check out
classic Martin.
Yeah, go check out that episode on Martin Luther's potty mouth because it's really good. So fast forward back to the 19th century, and according to the Cultural Encyclopedia of the Body, in some circles, also on top of that, girls were not allowed to even ride bikes or horses for fear that this would simulate masturbation. And boys, they further made special pants that were designed to prevent them from touching their genitals through the pockets. No pocket pool for them. And then on the extreme end, of course, they could be prescribed, or a doctor could recommend chastity belts, for that sort of thing. And then we're going to talk about some more fun quotes because
why did everyone think this was bad? Because is it in the Bible or something?
No, I mean, not really, actually. It comes from the and we'll get into this on Mark Twain's Some Thoughts on the Science of Onanism, but there was that whatever his name was, Onan something, in the Bible in the Old Testament, where he was supposed to impregnate his dead brother, so he's supposed to impregnate her former wife.
Yes, he had a duty, right?
Yeah, and so instead he just slept with her, and then instead of getting her pregnant, he would just pull out and then spill his seed on the floor or whatever.
The Bible's dirty sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And this was actually
spill his seed.
We're gonna cover this in the Origin of Everyday Things, but actually this was like the most popular method of birth control through most of history, and it's extremely effective. And we're going to get into how people always, whenever we mention it, everyone's like, "Oh, you shouldn't recommend that because it's not effective." No, it absolutely is effective. We'll get into it.
I was having this. We've done a video about this. I was having a discussion with someone the other day about this, and they were like, "Well, because of birth control becoming a big thing was it the 1950s and stuff with the pill?" And wait, hang on. I think their argument. The argument with the pill, which does make sense, is it gave women control. Yeah. Whereas before it was pretty much only the man.
Yeah, you just had to trust the guy that he would do that. That's the same with prostitutes and everything. That's how they would keep from getting pregnant. That was the most popular, and some of the lowest birth rates coincide with when that was the most popular method of birth control. And we'll get into just how you'll be shocked, or people, you won't be because you already know this, but people will be shocked.
I'm really shocked. I'm incredibly knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's at how effective. So anyways, but the problem with that story from the Bible is that the thing that it seemed God was getting angry about was not so much the pulling out, and clearly he wasn't really masturbating in this story. It was more that he was not getting his dead brother's wife pregnant as he was supposed to be doing. He was just sleeping with her, and so he was.
Come on, Onan, you had one job.
Yeah, but this has been, of course, interpreted, or it was interpreted as being showing why masturbation was was, and I think with the Catholic Church, isn't it like you're not supposed to even, or at least it used to be, some circles you're not even supposed to like use condoms or whatever, like no birth control or something like
right.
that. So
Yeah,
probably
that's
all
Catholicism, right?
I don't know that that's so much the case anymore, but I really don't know. So people can.
Well, I imagine not.
Yeah,
but,
we want
I
to think
like the.
Yeah.
Don't we have a cool pope now? Isn't there a cool pope?
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus.
He's probably into condoms.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like he's all poor and stuff, and generally like quite chill.
Yeah.
Whereas the previous guy seemed like a bit. Or was it the guy before that? Who was the guy with all the weird shoes and the gold hats and stuff? Who was like a bit more traditional?
See, I don't know. I actually tried to
John Paul dude, and then
like I had a series at one point. I had an author who was pretty good, and so I was like, all right, here's what I want to do. I want to do an article on every single pope. Like, let's just start from the beginning and go through it. And this turned out to be an effort in futility because it turns out like it's just not documented well, or like even like some of the like who was the this or that pope, and like nobody knows like a lot of it until more modern times actually. So we abandoned that quite quickly.
I wanted to do something about ancient Egypt like that.
Yeah,
going through all the ancient Egyptian people. And people are like, we don't even know if these are the same person or not.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, so that was the difficulty. There were some good ones that come out of that, like the Pope who wrote the romance novel. Like he was quite the,
Oh yeah,
he was kind of a funny one because
he was young as well, right?
Was that?
Was it? There was the young guy I thought it was the guy who wrote the romance novel and had the like sketchy past, and then he somehow like skipped a few things to become the pope.
Yeah, he had a really weird path to it because he was like totally like he had a super sketchy path for a pope. I mean, he was just more common, like sleeping with all sorts of women and like all this, and then he writing like a really popular romance novel among other like an erotic literature and this, and then like later he just sort of I don't remember, it was a weird progression to him actually getting elected like a random thing as pope, or appointed maybe I should say. And then
have you seen that show The Young Pope with Jude Law?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's recent. It's relatively recent. I feel it's HBO, but I'm not sure.
Which one?
Where Jude Law plays like he's this bad dude and he becomes elected pope somehow. He gets up to all this shifty stuff. It's quite good. Yeah. It's quite good. Yeah. I'm sure like quite offensive to the Catholic religion. But I enjoyed it. Yeah. I'm not Catholic, so there's that.
Yeah. So let's get back to Mark Twain.
Yeah, let's get on.
Mark Twain's. He's got to a lecture he gave on the Stomach Club, or to the Stomach Club in 1879, and it was as noted there or previously, some thoughts on the science of onanism, and so he's just.
Oh my God! Is this all one quote that I have to read?
Oh no, it's really long. There's a couple really long ones, and this is just him lecturing on. Yeah, he's just lecturing on masturbation. That at the time it was a very taboo subject, as you can see from these examples. But so he was just making fun of
talking that much in this show.
Yeah, he was making fun of the whole thing here, and it's pretty entertaining.
Shall I do it? Are you ready?
Do it.
Homer, in the second book of the Iliad, says, with fine enthusiasm, give me masturbation or give me death. Caesar, in his commentary, says, to the lonely it is company, to the forsaken it is a friend, to the aged and to the impotent it is a benefactor. They that are penniless are yet rich, in that they still have this majestic diversion. In another place, this experienced observer has said, there are times when I prefer it to sodomy. Robinson Crusoe says, I cannot describe what I owe to this gentle art. Queen Elizabeth said, it is the bulwark of virginity. Setaweo, the Zulu hero, remarked, a jerk in the hand is worth two in the bush. The immortal Franklin has said, masturbation is the best policy. Michelangelo said to Pope Julius II, self-negation is noble, self-culture beneficent. Beneficent. Is that the right? How do you say beneficent? Beneficent?
Sure, go with it.
Who knows? Who cares? Self-possession is manly, but to the truly great and inspiring soul, they are poor and tame compared with self-abuse. Brigham Young, an expert of incontestable authority, said, as compared with the other thing, it is the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. Solomon said, there is nothing to recommend it but its cheapness. Galen said, it is shameful to degrade to such bestial uses that grand limb, that formidable member, which we votaries of science dub the major maxillary, when they dub it at all, which is seldom. It would be better to amputate the os frontis than to put it to such use. It continues. Mr. Darwin was grieved to feel obliged to give up his theory that the monkey was the connecting link between man and the lower animals. I think he was too hasty. The monkey is the only animal except man that practices this science. Hence, he is our brother. There is a bond of sympathy and relationship between us. Give this ingenious animal an audience of the proper kind, and he will straightway put aside his other affairs and take Hawet. And you will see by his contortions and his ecstatic expression that he takes an intelligent and human interest in his performance.
Yeah, so then he goes on, and I cut it out. But then he concludes with...
Of all the various kinds of sexual intercourse, this has the least to recommend it. As an amusement, it is too fleeting. As an occupation, too wearing. As a public exhibition. There is no money in it.
That one, not so
He's
much.
never met cam girls, has he?
No, not the case anymore.
Oh, it is unsuited to the drawing room. And in the most cultured society, it has long been banished. It has, at last, in our day of progress and improvement, been degraded to brotherhood. With flatulence. Among the best bred, these two acts are now indulged in only private, though by consent of the whole company. When only males are present, it is still permissible in good society to remove the embargo on the fundamental size. So, in concluding, I say, if you must gamble away your life sexually, don't play a lone hand too much. When you feel a revolutionary uprising in your system, get your Vendome column down some other way. Don't jerk it down. I'm so confused as to what he's saying. Is he saying having a wank's good or bad?
He kind of goes back and forth a little bit. But the general thing is
but it's sarcasm.
He's sarcasm,
right?
like here it's bad. But yeah, it was kind of a lecture he gave though. So yeah, no surprise in this era was when chastity belts sort of had their heyday, and then sort of went away, and then just more recently have made a resurgence, and probably more popular today than ever before. So
I would say so. I mean, because before, I feel like any sort of anything sexual that is outside of the norm is now more than ever.
Yeah.
Because
maybe not more than
people connect.
Maybe not more than ever, because I would say, like, you know, when you're talking like Roman times, and it wasn't until like they had that period where like even like the church would vilify everything sexual, but before that it was people were more sort of like free, and then nowadays sort of coming back around. Yeah.
I don't know. I think if you're into something these days, you can find other people who are into that because of the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas even in Roman times, a lot of stuff I'm sure was acceptable.
Yeah.
But I'm sure some stuff like societally, I mean, like, but some stuff wasn't. Now with the internet, it's like, one, there's probably an app for that. Yeah. And two, you could buy whatever you want on the internet and it arrives in an unmarked brown box.
Yeah. It's true. That's true.
Like, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But also the Romans were pretty crazy. So,
yeah. So, the bill now. The bill.
Yeah.
The bill. Ad spot.
We don't have a sponsor.
We don't have.
So, well, we do.
We'll go with, I don't know. What side projects? I saw that the other day for the first time. When did you start that one?
Ooh. This month, 3 weeks ago, I think. It was basically, I've got a channel called Mega Projects, which is about mega projects. Obviously, that's how I always advertise it. It's creative. And a lot of people were suggesting things in the comments that didn't really work for a whole Mega Projects video. So I was like, cool, that'll go in a list or something. So I do like little lists of things that weren't quite mega enough, and it's called Side Projects. You can subscribe to it if you want to, and if you don't want to, that's also totally fine. Yeah. I know I have a lot of channels. Yeah. What you should definitely subscribe to,
Highlight History. It's an up and comer.
We're back on the wagon,
and it's rising fast.
Back on the wagon with that.
Yeah.
It's like the way I describe it. I don't know. I wrote an ad copy for it the other day, and I was like, it's kind of like Today I Found Out, but just more history
and more. The video production is also a little more documentary style, a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, it's a little bit more fancy.
Yeah, it's a little more fancy. Not like super fancy, because that would be too expensive, but it is more fancy.
Yeah, fancy videos, fancy, expensive.
Yeah. But yeah, it gets more.
What's Fact Quickie?
Fact Quickie is the
well, it's go subscribe to Highlight History. What's Fact Quickie?
Fact Quickie is the one you made fun of me for calling that, because you're like, dude, I remember your email. You were like, dude, you're going to be known as the Quickie guy. And
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe that's just a British expression, but then you were like, no.
I thought that.
We said
I
that as
kind
well.
of thought that was funny. So, but yeah, so that one is going to be that one actually.
You're also the man who called the BrainFood Show appetizer the main course. Bill, I think we should take away your naming privileges.
No, we totally should. Today I found out it's like the worst name of anything ever. I name everything horribly. So it's like a thing. But Fact Quickie.
But you love it at the time.
No, I do actually. Yeah. Fact Quickie is going to be a condensed today, I found out. And the channel's already up, but it's not like what you see there is not going to be what it is. It's just condensed. I've already got, I don't know, I got a ton of episodes. Just got to actually have them produced and everything. But it's just condensed today, I found out. So if we might have a 15-minute, it's going to be, every video is going to be 3 to 5 minutes. So no matter what the topic, and it'll just be compressed to that. So a very quick version, because a lot of people request that. And then, I don't know. I got some others, like Ancient Marvels is one that I'm gonna do coming up, and which I couldn't believe that name wasn't taken. Ancient Marvels. That's actually, I feel like it's a good name.
Is it not like, I feel like there's like a documentary?
That's what I thought.
That's maybe Ancient.
That's what I thought. But then when I was googling around, no one on YouTube, but also it wasn't really coming up anywhere. So I was like, hey.
I originally wanted to call mega projects, mega structures.
Oh.
And apparently there was a huge documentary series from Discovery in like the early 2000s or something called Megastructure. And I was like, oh God, I got to read all my graphics.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm fairly sure like megastructures is a word in the dictionary, so it's not going to be. But I'm like, I don't want to get in trouble with Discovery.
Well,
so,
major
screw this.
mega projects actually opens it up a little bit. You can like it a little bit more,
right?
So that's better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've done all this awesome. I was so pleased. We did a video all about the EU, like the founding of the EU. Like arguably certainly the most important political institution in Europe. And I was like, this is so cool. This is a great mega project. And I was super pleased with the video. And it's like half as many people watched it. It's like, yeah, people just want to hear about big boats.
Yeah. I guess.
Come on, watch I want to do stuff like this.
Yeah, you want to diversify. That's one of the weaknesses of Today I Found Out versus like a lot of other channels, because it's so broad that it's like when you're putting out a video every day too, people pick and choose, which is really bad for the algorithm, because it's like, we'll watch one every 7 days because this one is my interest and the others are not. And when you hit the one that I find interesting, and it's just really bad algorithmically, and just posting every day like that. So sort of like that.
People ask why I do different channels for different things. That's the reason.
And it does so much better, like mega projects and stuff. You look like, and if you post less often and stuff like that, that also helps. But yeah, that's specific, because then it gets everyone who's interested in that, and then they click on like every single one, which is really good for the algorithm and everything. And they probably have better watch through rates than the general populace, who might be like, oh, I'll click that one, and then like, no, this one's not interesting me in like 3 minutes, so I'll move on then. But yeah, that's it. Today I found out it's way too broad, and like, yeah, exactly.
Well, fact quickie, highlight history, side projects. We are making some stuff.
Doing it. That Ancient Marvels actually, because I actually wanted to do a music one, because I was almost like a music major and all that. But that one I put up a poll on what channels to do next, and Ancient Marvels just dominated. It was like 80%. It was crazy. I don't know, like 50,000 votes or whatever it was. It just dominated because like yeah. So anyway, that one's coming too soon.
Yeah, of course. Like history is just. I mean.
Yeah.
People love history. People love marvels. I did a video. I think it was even called like 5 ancient marvels that people forgot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that video did well.
Yeah, of course it did. Exactly. So yeah, I am still going to do the music one, just because I just think that one's more interesting to me. But yeah.
Dude, you're going to get absolutely destroyed by copyright claims.
Yeah, but I'll work around it.
It's like you've talked about doing a film one, and I'm like, dude,
oh yeah.
And people often suggest like, why don't you do one about pop culture or something? You can watch all these movies you've never seen. I'm like, because I like making money, to be honest. Because I don't want Warner Brothers to take all my money when I make a video about a Warner Brothers movie.
Yeah, that was actually Flickfacts was actually years ago. I did a test one on that, and it did really well it was a brand new channel, no promotion, anything, and it still got, I don't know, like 10,000 views or something, which is crazy for like brand new, no promotion. It just
was this the Terminator video?
So I do that. And it got like 3 copyright dings, and none of them were legitimate. Not a single one, but I couldn't argue them, because you just say, oh, no, that's not legitimate. That's clearly fair use. And like in every case it was, very carefully. And in every case, the person just rejected it, because they can. They just like, no, we're
yeah. It's like, take me to court. What are you going to do?
And you're obviously not going to do that. When you do get big, I think you can start, like CinemaSins, I believe, has like a whole like legal team that like they throw at the problem.
This is true, and this is what you should do. But I don't want to be running a law firm.
Exactly.
I want to be making videos.
No, and this is why I've never.
It's like, I have no interest.
I will
in this.
do the flick facts. I will jump on that at some point, but it's why it's always sort of been on the back burner. Like every time there's time for something, like I don't want to mess with that right now because it is just going to be like a nightmare of like every single video is going to get dinged and just have to.
Yeah, so you know what's definitely out of copyright? The pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But yeah. Anyways, that was the longest ad spot in the world.
Well, yeah, it's for our own stuff.
Yeah.
We're extra motivated.
We pay well. So the main course, today is, let's see. Yes. Okay. So and again, in sort of popular entertainment, you often have this idea of like this person being from modern times going back to medieval times.
Wait, we haven't done the main part yet?
No.
Oh. Okay. We're 40 minutes in, dude.
This one's going to be good.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Sorry, yeah.
This will be our longest one because this one actually is pretty long from here. That was the quickest part we already did.
Yeah, this is like when you have the chicken wings as an appetizer. You're already full by the time the main course comes.
Totally. This is like the breadsticks at Olive Garden. So you have that perception that you get transported back in time to medieval times, and then the people, the English speaker, just talks English to everyone, right? And maybe they have a little different accent or something like that, but everyone can speak. But could you actually, if you went back to medieval times, could you actually speak to people back there in medieval times? And again, to
No, I don't reckon.
well, I mean, you're pretty much right, but
I guess it
depends.
depends.
So it goes from the 5th to the 15th century. So that's a pretty big gap. That's typically when most people would say medieval times is.
But I mean, dude, you read like a Charles Dickens book or whatever from 100-something years ago, and you're like, what is he talking about? Like, one is his use of like punctuation is a mystery, and then like there's words and sentences that are just like, what? And that was way shorter time.
See, I
ago.
like if you ever go read like Ben Franklin's autobiography, I love the way he writes, and he'll have these like page-long sentences. It's like one sentence, but it's a whole page long, and I actually really like it in the way he talks. And his autobiography is super entertaining and hilarious. Like he's got that one point where he's talking about like why men should always sleep with older women. Like as a thing, and he's like arguing for like older.
Oh, I think
it's
this has come up in a
yeah,
video.
it's a really funny like rant he goes on. And then he has this rant about why women should be educated, and he's just like, you know what? For the people who say no, women can't be educated, whatever, you have like moral issue with it, but like throw that out. He's like, you know who are fun to talk to is educated women. You know who are not fun to talk to is not educated women. And so this is sort of his argument. And he has this whole thing about older educated women are like the ones to go for. It's really kind of a funny, and it's so funny because this is like this, genius of like one of the geniuses in human history, right? And it's just so weird to like see his thoughts and his joke and his sense of humor. Like he definitely had an awesome sense of humor. He belonged to that one club that would go in caves. They would go in caves and just like, it was like a debauchery club, like the Hellfire Club, I think it was. And they would just go, it was really funny. And that was kind of a funny one. We did a video on that at some point, but anyways.
Was this the one with the British guy?
Yeah, there was some, some British.
I feel like this was when he was in the
UK.
UK.
Something cave. It was, I think it was called the Hellfire Club or something like that. And it was pretty funny.
It feels right.
Yeah. You can still, I think, go visit the caves of that one. I think it's like a tourist thing now. But in any event, so we're going to look at the question of can you speak English to people in medieval times and whether you can or can't. And as we already sort of spoiled a little bit, they can't really. But when could you? How far back could you go and then speak English and be able to be understood and whatnot? So, and this one actually, it's more than just the words, the vocabulary and stuff, as we'll get into here in a bit. So to begin, we're going to do the normal rant about grammar Nazis, which that dictionary episode we did, which the whole thing was just ranting about that, is one of our most popular podcast episodes somehow, which was shocking. I think it was number 2.
Yeah, I really like
it. Was number 2 on the list, and it's literally, I think we just titled it like something about the dictionary. I don't remember. It's not, but yeah, super popular.
Well, dictionaries are extremely popular, and everyone's interested in them. I read it every day.
Yeah. Exactly. So
loads of words and stuff.
So language evolves really rapidly, contrary to what many a grammar Nazi would wish. And so, and lament. And we're going back to like Cicero. So the Roman orator Cicero. So pretty much as long as there has been grammar of any sorts, people have complained about it changing. So Roman orator Cicero, like he scorned changes, such things as punctuation, when punctuation started to be introduced around that time. And so he was mocking this, and he said, when and how long to pause to quote,
ought to be determined not by a stroke interposed by a copyist, by the constraint of the rhythm.
Yeah.
I fully disagree.
Yeah.
Dude, like, as someone who reads stuff for a living, it's having the comma in the right place. It's really handy.
Yeah, and this was the thing, is back then you couldn't just take a text, like a speech, like in this time, and read it. Like, you couldn't just pick it up and read it to an audience like you're reading stuff like right now. Like, you can't, it's not possible. You had to study it. Because there's the thing, you don't just not have punctuation, you don't have spaces between words either. It's just all one run-on thing, no punctuation, no spaces, and that's it. And so
I kind of wish you'd put something in here as an example of that for me to try and attempt.
Oh, I got one for you. I didn't actually put it in, but I do have one. Well, I guess it. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it won't come across to people, but I'm gonna.
Well, can you paste it in? I'll have a crack at it. Embarrass myself, because I think I'm quite a good sight reader these days.
Yeah, here it is.
I'd like to see what.
Oh, and everything's capitalized. There was no lowercase, so you didn't even have that.
Oh, great. That'll be extra handy.
Yeah, so I'm going to paste it in.
Do I have to read it as if
they're
shouting?
Yeah.
In the beginning, there was no punctuation, lowercase letters, or even spaces between words. The real so was no grammatical way of distinguishing when an idea had finished and a new one begun. I think that should be began. It didn't help that the idea of standardized spelling was also,
that's also not a thing.
Not a thing. At least, oh great, so yeah, you included that as well. At least not as we would think of it. Add a swearer left to muddle their way, and as others were left to muddle their way through any text as best they could. Unsurprisingly, understanding what a particular work was actually saying on the first read through was pretty unwell heard of at the time.
That was not bad.
That was not bad for a wall of capital letters that is all together.
But you could,
although you did get the spelling all correct.
Yeah. You
except for began and begun, unless I was wrong about that.
Yeah, I think you were right. But
there was quite a lot going on in my brain.
But yeah, so imagine it's all different spellings. It's just sort of, and then imagine, like, you couldn't just get up and give a speech, like a really stirring speech, as these, like, Romans, that was like a thing. They would give up and give these stirring speeches. You couldn't do it just by reading. Like, you just couldn't do it. So you had to practice.
No, that was.
You had to get it, and it was like it was an art and a skill that you had to practice a lot. And so, so then punctuation gets introduced to sort of start to help this a little bit, and Cicero didn't care for that at all. He was like, you know, in my day, we didn't need no punctuation. So it turns out, until approximately the 7th and 8th centuries, I think is, on this one, we're talking spaces between words, is the 7th and 8th centuries, and it was thought to be by Irish and Scottish monks who were really tired of wrestling with unfamiliar Latin words and whatnot, so they started introducing spaces between the words when they would figure it out, just to make it easier to read things. Because you can imagine that, like, you've come across a word you don't even know, and then there's no spaces between anything, not standardized spelling. And like this, it's just like, you know, that would be really hard to translate and whatnot. So it was also around the end of the 8th century that Charlemagne helped introduce lowercase letters through the monk Alcuin, who he asked to develop a unified alphabet, and that included these lowercase letters. So that's when lowercase letters started to become a thing. So when sort of summing up the sort of evolution of language and everyone constantly groaning about it. So Betty Berner of the Linguists Society of America, she sums up.
The speech patterns of young people tend to grate on the ears of adults because they're unfamiliar. Also, new words and phrases are used in spoken or informal language sooner than in formal written language, so it's true that the phrases you may hear a teenager use may not be appropriate for business letters, but that doesn't mean they're worse, just newer. I always keep this in mind because I hear like new phrases and stuff and I'm like, oh, that's a bit tiresome. But then I check myself before I wreck myself because you don't want to be a Nazi about this stuff. Like, the one recently that I hear people saying is like to spill tea. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
To spill the tea means to like to gossip about someone. Not quite, but like if we were talking smack about someone And I was like, yeah, but did you hear they did this? Oh, we were spilling the tea.
Oh, all right then.
And then there was another one. And to bring receipts means, yeah.
I don't,
See, this is good.
No, I don't know this one.
I'm so middle-aged. Okay, boomer. It means to have evidence to back it up. So like maybe you have like some video of them doing something or something they posted on their Instagram or like their DMs or something.
Yeah. All right. We're going to have an episode.
Yeah. So I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Whatever.
We're going to have an episode on text messaging and why text messaging is like a major language revolution and everyone should embrace the stuff that everyone hates. But it's happened so rapidly that, people hate it extra much. But yeah, we're going to have a whole episode on it because it's super fascinating. The whole, and it's actually really sort of on the evolution of language, which we're covering, partially right here, but we're going to cover it in more depth there. And
all the dictionary episode people are going to love
yeah, this is going to be good. If
we're going to get another big episode.
That's the thing. This was one of the most interesting ones we have ever produced, like articles in the history lab, 5,000 or whatever articles on Today I Found Out, and like 2,000 videos or whatever. This one, and it just bombed on YouTube. Even on a reposting, I think I was like, no, everyone should watch this, and it bombed the second time too, and just nobody cared. And I was like, this is like insanely fascinating, but we're gonna force it down people's throat on the podcast because we can do that, and it's gonna be good. I think the podcast actually platform is a little better for this particular one because I think it was also the problem was it was so long. Like even in video form, it was like 30 minutes or something like that. So, yeah, so...
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, so we're going to get over to the...
Just calling this a radio form.
Yeah, we're going to go to the... I should mention about accents. So not only do you have language evolving rapidly at time, you also have accents changing over time. So pertinent at the topic at hand. So I think we've mentioned this before on like that episode of the pirate, that famous female pirate who was like the most successful pirate of all time by far. And then she sort of got to retire and like got pardoned and... Like, I think she became like some sort of noblewoman or something just because they couldn't stop her. So they just made her a noblewoman and pardoned her. But anyways, so if you travel back to Shakespearean times and listen to the bards speak, most people think of like the received pronunciation, like the really ultra, high end, British accent or whatever. But in fact, he probably talked more like the Pirates of the Caribbean pirates and whatnot. So... That's just sort of an example of the accents change over time. So that's going to be an issue when looking at talking back. And we'll get into it's actually even more of an issue than you might think. But so even like today, there's still places in Britain or the UK where you can go. And if the people talk with their native accent in English, but like they're native and don't try to make it sound more Englishy, like even most English speakers wouldn't be able to understand them.
Oh, dude, 100%.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand what people from the north are saying.
Yeah. And
most of the time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but there are definitely places where it's like, what?
And those people know how to switch their speech to be more English-y, but they are speaking English, just, it's like little different dialects and things like that. So, so all this is a bit of a problem for going back. And the other huge problem, so say you do invent the time machine that is never covered. I don't think there's any popular media I've ever seen it covered on. Maybe there's a book or something somewhere. If you invent a time machine, it needs to be a spaceship. It absolutely has to be a spaceship. So we're just going to cover this because I think it's kind of fascinating. The Earth, orbiting around the sun at 66,600 miles per hour is how fast we're moving there. And the Earth itself is rotating on its axis 1,070 miles per hour. And so there's, for kilometers, what is it like, I don't know, 1.5 times that? Did you get the kilometers per hour?
I don't know.
Something like that.
I don't know.
So just
it's really fast.
It's really fast. That's the point. And the whole solar system is orbiting around the Milky Way at 560,000 miles per hour. On top of that, our galaxy is hurtling through space relative to our local group of galaxies at about 670,000 miles per hour. Super fast. So all this motion is taking place. So even if you just go with that 66,600 mile per hour orbiting around the sun, that's the only one we're accounting for, not even all the other stuff that's super fast. That is 100,000 feet per second or 19 miles per second. So whatever that is, like, 25 or 30 kilometers per second is how fast. So if you go back, and so for reference here, the boundary to space is about 62 miles. So if you go back just a few seconds and you're on the surface of the planet on the opposite side of its rotating, you will be in space, even just 3 seconds, officially considered to be in space.
Dude, even worse.
Yeah.
on the other hand, you could be like several miles inside the planet.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on but then when you think that, and that's just that one metric. If you go all that relative motion that's happening, you're definitely you're going to be in space if you just go back like just a couple seconds. And if you're going back,
Dude, a couple of seconds,
yeah,
fraction of a second.
exactly. And if you go back to medieval times, you're off. You're very far away from Earth.
You're gonna have to, yeah.
You're gonna need
Your spaceship is gonna have to take you far.
It's gonna have to be fast, and you have to have good supplies and all that, and whatnot. So, and I think they could deal with this in
I'm glad
popular.
you brought up the supplies,
Yeah,
because
popular cinema. They could just say, "Oh, the time machine works more like you're like some sort of like wormhole or something," and so you can calibrate it to always take you to the exact space where the Earth will be if you run the
or
number.
like it anchors itself to
like
something.
they could cover it, but no one ever mentions it. It could just be like a couple sentences of line that would just fix the problem.
A hard sci-fi would deal with this, like some hard sci-fi books, like they're not going to mention it in like Back to the Future, but like in books where it goes into a bit more depth, they do discuss this kind of stuff.
I've never come across it mentioned. I'm sure there is some, that's because I can't be the only one who gets annoyed by that. But in any event, so
I feel like the anchoring thing has been mentioned in some book where it's like you need an object that was present throughout time to like anchor it. The time. Dude, this is all so fictional. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So, where are we now? So,
just although good reference point for. Although, look, if you've invented a time machine, you've probably thought this through because you're real smart.
Yeah, we should hope so. But this at least discussion of it helps ensure that this will be the longest episode we've ever produced because we're not even halfway through yet. So after you invent the time machine and you do a quick stop to kill baby Hitler or bring Mr. Rogers back to teach his parents better parenting and life lessons to teach their kids.
Wait, what happened to Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers is only the greatest saint of all time.
Oh, well, I know who he is, but like, how do you bring him back?
Well, you go back in time a little bit, grab him, take him back to go teach baby Hitler's parents.
Oh, you mean take him back to like Hitler? I thought because I'd never heard of Mr. Rogers getting hit by a bus or something.
No,
so we're not going back in time to save his
grabbing
life.
Mr.
We're just going back
Rogers.
to take him back to Hitler.
Well, and grab to teach his parents some life, some good, love everybody, accept everybody type of things. And
let's
then
just kill Hitler. No one minds. It's okay.
But killing Hitler doesn't actually work.
Like, look, if you're on your mission,
but killing,
you got to kill.
You got to kill them all. And then if you're, at the same time that eugenics thing was so popular the world over, like even like Churchill and all these were quite in support until the Nazis kind of killed that. To everyone was like, oh, wait a minute, they took it to the logical extreme. That we're all kind of in support of, but they took it like to a whole nother level, and then the popularity of eugenics and stuff died out rapidly after that. So like,
well, the Nazis were also operating on a very flawed model of not that I'm defending eugenics in any way, but the Nazis not extreme, wrong.
Yeah, that's
because they weren't eliminating. I mean, yes, they were eliminating people who had disabilities and potentially genetic disabilities, but they were also eliminating homosexuals, and it's like. That's not genetic.
But then
they weren't going to reproduce anyway. Or Jews or Gypsies or Slavs. And it's like, well, these weren't, this was the Nazis' ideal of an Aryan race, which is not exactly what eugenics would argue for from a scientific perspective. Again, not defending eugenics, just extra shitting on Nazi interpretation of eugenics.
Oh, yeah. Just the mention of eugenics is... we did that, or I don't think we've ever made it into a video, but I did an article on it, the history of eugenics, and it's quite fascinating. You have everyone from like the greatest person in history besides Mr. Rogers, Teddy Roosevelt, who we've covered so much. Even he was like, yeah, that eugenics, like bad people shouldn't be allowed to reproduce, and like this was just a thing, kind of most everybody thought up until the Nazis, and then everyone was like, wait a minute. Let's backtrack a little bit on that. So, but anyways, in the comments of that one, which is just covering the history, everyone was like, oh, like raging about that we were even talking about eugenics, like in the comments and stuff. It was like, all right then. Yeah. But
well, it's a bit weird when you can't have a discussion about something.
Yeah, and can't just cover the history, which is super fascinating. People took issue with the thing that I said it was fascinating. That's you, which I don't know. Well, the Nazis are fascinating. It doesn't mean I'm supporting
the
them.
Nazis were fascinating. It doesn't. Yeah. Like the genocide is fascinating. Like that fascinating doesn't imply good. It's
and seemingly like every woman on the
surprise. It can be bad. It can be good.
Yeah, seemingly every woman on the planet loves serial killer like drama or like podcasts and like this, and it doesn't. They're fascinated, but it's not like it's not like supporting it or whatever. But anyways,
Wait, they're not supporting it?
no, the use of the word fascinating really triggered many people on that one. Where are we?
Someone got triggered the other day from. Oh, what was it? You wrote in, or whoever wrote wrote that Ireland joined the UK, and they were like, "We didn't join. You forced us into it." And I'm like, "Join doesn't imply that." Yeah. We didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't apply.
Just join.
Yeah.
It means two things join together. Like, what you're talking about?
Yeah, and you can't.
And it was like
we're not going to do a big aside on that video on like because it was about something else on just like what the intricacies of Ireland joining the UK. Like, that wasn't the topic. That could be a good other video about things. But you got to be sometimes. So where are we anyways? So we're going back in time. All right. So you've invented the time machine. You're going back how far? Could you go back? And it turns out, not super far.
Oh my God, what are we talking about? I'm so lost.
on how far back in time you could go and still speak English to people.
Oh, about speaking English, yeah.
It is not that far from. If you can speak German and Dutch too.
Did we just do like 10 minutes on eugenics? What is going on?
If we can do, it's okay. The next podcast episode is super short. If you can speak German or Dutch. Then you're going to do a lot better. Like if you can speak German, Dutch, and English, you can read a lot of Old English really well. You're still not going to be able to speak to people though, for reasons we're going to get into. Even if you could read if they wrote it, which is also a problem, which we'll get into. We're going to get into all this. So how did English develop? So we can start if we're going to go back to like the 5th century. So we have so a lot of English developed at the series of invasions was sort of the product of Germanic tribes known as the Angles, Jutes, and Saxons around the 5th and 6th century. So right at the beginning of this medieval times. And there's also a smattering of Latin kind of in the early going, and that gave us most of what is Old English. So if you want to look back at a Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, so one of the popular literatures where someone does go back to this time in King Arthur's time, at least supposedly when King Arthur lived.
Is that Mark Twain?
Yes, it is. And so 6th century, that's around when this is. So this is kind of this early period and whatnot. And so looking at like some actual English in the ballpark of this period, so we're going to go to the 9th century in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. It has the following. And note here for when you're pronouncing, it's going to make a lot more sense if you make the SC makes the SH sound in this next part. That helps make it a little more sensical.
Bright in England ist 100 lang and 200 brad, and her sins on Pam Ignant Fief Gapodu, Ashlich Brit.
Oh, remember? The SC makes the sh sound. So then you'll get this one will make more sense. This part will make a lot more sense if you make the SC make the SH sound.
English, British, Scottish, Pittish, and
I was wondering if you would know that one because I had never heard of this one. So in the modern English it translates to
the island's Britain is 800 miles long and 200 miles broad, and there are in the island 5 nations: English, Welsh, Scottish, Pictish, and Latin. No, don't know it.
Don't know Pictish? I didn't know if that was something like covered in English history or something.
Yeah, they were the Picts, right? Picts.
Okay.
But I don't know anything about them.
Oh, I didn't. I'd never even heard of them at all. It's completely. Yeah, all the others are familiar, of course, but so
I've never heard of the Welsh.
If you look at it, like, and if you kind of like, if you look at sort of, and you kind of look at the text, it's not like completely a foreign language. And if you can speak German or Dutch as well, you're going to do even better. But you're not gonna be able to talk. Like, even forget about accents and all that sort of, and you're not going to be able to talk to anyone. But I mean, at this point, about 50% of the core of modern English was in place. So I mean, if you didn't have the accent different and stuff like that, you might be able to pick out words here and there to get by. So then the Vikings would come along a few hundred years and around the 8th century, and they would lend a lot of words to Old English. From Old Norse, so that kind of gets a little closer to English. And then Norman conquest, which is a significant one there, 1066, and that they firmly established the version of French, the Old Norman, as a language of choice for the elite of the country, which then kind of trickled down to the masses to some extent, and the common English kind of trickled up to the elite, and so they kind of had this meshing of languages, and that sort of all combined brings us to Middle English that spanned around the 12th through the 15th centuries, and is kind of as mentioned, 15th century is kind of when medieval times is generally considered to have ended. So during the 14th century, the upper class still spoke the Anglo-Norman, but as the century progressed, it's significant here, it almost was completely displaced by English there. So, and then we get to the latter half of the 14th century, and that's where we have Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales and stuff like that. And English started to look a lot more familiar at this point. So if you look, I mean, you can probably read this one and kind of get what's being said here.
A knight there was, and that a worthy man, that fro the time he first began to riden out, he loved chivalry, truth and honour, freedom and courtesy. Full worthy was he in his lords were, and thereto had he ridden no man fur. In Christendom as in heathenese, and ever honoured for his worthinessy.
Yeah, and so you did really good with that, but if people could see it, like
okay.
this, yeah, the spellings are really weird.
It's messy.
All over the place. So that's very unfamiliar. But the words...
we use Google Docs. There's so many red lines underneath.
Yeah. The words themselves are
like
familiar.
Error.
So at this point you think, oh, okay, I could understand this because if they're speaking, I'm not having to read it. But no, you would not be able to understand it actually in a conversational way because this predated something. And you want to talk about rapid change in language that probably people of the era lamented like crazy, is the Great Vowel Shift. So around the mid-14th century, it concluded around the 16th century or so, there was this really rapid change in the way different vowels in English were spoken. And so for a couple examples here, in Middle English, the word bite would be pronounced beat, and the word meat would be pronounced mate. And so it just like all the vowels had different sounds basically. And you could see how this would be a problem trying to understand someone talking. So like even if they were say meet later, I'm not sure how they would say later, but they would say mate later, and later would be also different. But so you could see that would a different connotation and whatnot. So you just, I mean, given a time, you'd probably be able to figure out these vowels like, oh, I got it. Like you'd start to figure out why all the vowels sound different than we expect them to sound. But this would be so hard to understand anyone, even if they were using modern English, it would be weird to understand them. But then also you have other differences as well and whatnot. So, so still you're not going to be able to speak very well before the Great Vowel Shift concluded. And then we got kind of the vowel sounds we have today. And then, of course, we're not going to be able to recognize a lot of words. So you can think, oh, but I'll get around it because they could write it. Because, I mean, you just read that thing just fine, the writing.
Even though this bad.
But they don't write in like Times New Roman, right? If you go look at texts that were written like the original Chaucer texts and stuff like this, you're not going to be able to read that. It's
also people can't write and stuff. Really.
Yeah,
most people can't write back in the day.
Yeah, but even if you could find someone who did, people could just Google it. It's not. You're not going to be able to read it. You're just not. It's not something we're familiar with the way they write. So yeah, you're still not going to be able to do it. So we do. Although when you have this Great Vowel Shift happening, and it was around this time where things in just like a century switched, where it was like all of a sudden, no way you're gonna, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, we would be able to start understanding them. So we consider, 1561, we have the play Gorboduc, where it says,
persistent plague, a poisonous ill, hath sown sores in certain now of late, a wood-spirited heart with a wayward will, a stubborn stomach to nourish debate, bleared yet blinded eyes, a brazen breast, a laden brain, I reckon, not the rest.
So there, it's a lot more...
But again, it's messy.
Yeah, it is messy, but it's still pretty readable. And here, again, is sort of at the end of the Great Vowel Shift, where they would at least start pronouncing the words more like we would pronounce them to some extent. Anyway, they still have some accent problems and stuff like that. So that brings us to the turn of the 16th and 17th centuries there. And this is where we're starting to make we're there. So if you've ever read like Shakespeare's plays, King James Bible, you got it. Like you can read what it says, right? So this is when the way they speak and sort of the words are starting to really be fairly familiar. And so that is when we could sort of start to make some progress and actually talk, as long as you're not, and this significant here was also when things started to become more standardized with language. So like, as we've noted, like in Britain and stuff, you can go like 30 miles away and find like a completely different dialect and whatnot. But this started to be a little bit more standardized, particularly in London, where it's sort of like a melting pot of all this stuff that sort of got standardization. So if you go to London, you would start to be able to talk, but you would again, so you would have this, the accent would be very different than you would expect. So you were thinking Shakespeare, as mentioned, you're thinking like received pronunciation, but what you would actually get is something akin to original pronunciation, which is generally described as sort of a mix of the American and Irish accent, or like pirate speak is another common thing. So like a blending
so
of
cool. Everyone's speaking like a pirate.
Yeah, exactly, and particularly like
you'd make a movie about this, and you'd make it legitimate, and everyone in your movie speaking like a pirate, and everyone would be like, "Well, why?" It was a bit bad. I mean, they just had everyone speak like a pirate. So no,
and it's so much better too for like Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was very body and like this, and like people think of it all this like refined Shakespeare, and you have these like received pronunciation. It's like, no, these were like for the common man. These plays were made to like rile people up and like be like very body and like all this and this, and speaking like a pirate is what they actually did, and whatnot. So this also gets sort of compared to the West Country English accent for people, and that also is why we have the general sort of pirate speak, because it's not obviously the way Hollywood depicts it is not actually how pirates talked and whatnot. There's pirates from different languages and everything, and even the English pirates probably didn't talk like that. But the West Country English accent from the is quite similar, and the reason that all sort of got put together is Robert Newton's 1950s portrayal of Long John Silver in Treasure Island. It sort of set the standard there, and from there he used the West Country English dialect, because that's where he grew up, and also where Long John Silver supposedly grew up in the story or whatever. And so they did have fishing and shipyards and stuff there, and so they had different stuff like the yar and whatnot. That comes from that, and that was a thing in the early, when he grew up. That was a thing there, and that just sort of meant okay, that was just kind of the affirmation thing there. And so he borrowed a lot of this dialect. And,
do you want fries with that? Arr!
Yeah, exactly. And so he just borrowed it for that, and that portrayal was so popular and sort of like set the standard for pirate speak. And so that is why the West Country accent, which is more like Shakespearean, how they would have talked back then in London, and whatnot. So, and if people want to go check it out, David and Ben Crystal, I believe their father-son team, they have a great video on this where they demonstrate the accent, and they also explain in great detail how linguists actually know how the Shakespearean people talked, how they would have talked there, and it's quite fascinating. If I remember, I will put a link to it, but if I don't, just Google David and Ben Crystal Shakespearean accent or whatever. I'm sure it'll come up. But yeah, so let's see, where are we now? So yeah, this is the time in history where you could finally, so that if you're not too far before the 16th century, you could go back and speak, but that is after medieval times. So you would not be able to go back to medieval times and speak. So then from that point, it would be more of like a culture shock problem, where you got your extreme racism, sexism, religious extremism, rampant disease everywhere, relatively poor
disease everywhere.
Yeah, relatively poor hygiene, because this was when the disease everywhere started to get people to bathe less often, as we discussed previously. I mean, they still tried to keep themselves clean, but not like to modern standards, especially at this point when they weren't going to bathhouses all the time. And then like London smelling just like so awful because of like the great stink and like all this, and everything was awful and horrible, and that would be the more thing that would, but you'd at least be able to talk to people for the most part. They would just think you talked a little weird.
Yeah.
And use some words sometimes.
You'll be able to talk to them about their extremely racist, sexist, and religiously extreme views.
Yeah, you'd get by. They would not understand some words you said and vice versa, but you could get by.
Yeah.
At that
Meanwhile,
point,
giving you smallpox.
Yeah, exactly. And your immune system's probably crap compared to theirs, because they're living with this their whole life, so they probably have like awesome immune system or all sorts of things, and you're like, getting diarrhea the first second you just like breathe the air. So
it'd be bad if you gave them COVID though; they'd not be able to deal with this.
Yeah, true. You could give back.
They'd be like added to the list of other shit that's killing us constantly.
Yeah, the new plague. So that is the main course for today. Which what are we on now? Like, I don't know. We've been talking for a while, but we're gonna have a dessert.
You mean time wise? I don't even know. I fell asleep for it. No, I'm just.
Yeah. We are having a dessert anyway for people who want more. So this, we're gonna talk a little bit about more being knighted. So like we talked in the previous ones about the historic knighting and stuff. But what about today? Like, what's the process? What do you get for being knighted? Do you get anything for being knighted anymore, or did you ever? So we're gonna.
Did we do a video about this?
We did. We did. I liked this one.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
I know the answer, so I won't spoil it, I guess.
Yeah. And so first let's talk a little bit about, the knighting process and what. So you have different orders for people that don't know. And so the queen can appoint a person to whatever order she wants, although there's usually some other groups that recommend, and then she just kind of goes with it usually. So different orders of knighthood. And so, for example, so it looks like, so the members of the military or civil service, if they get knighted, they tend to go in the order of Bath. And then so like people who's work in like foreign relations and stuff will usually go to the order of St. Michael and St. George, stuff like this. So they have different ones that are common. But the most common one is the most excellent order of the British Empire, which is so like Bill and Ted, like excellent adventures, like
most excellent, dude.
Yeah, that's the most
If I
common.
had that, I'd demand people pronounce it that way.
Well,
it's most excellent.
And we're going to discuss because like popular media and stuff generally, if you're a British person and you're popular enough and for a long enough time, eventually someone might nominate you to be knighted, and that's sort of how people can recommend you, and then they'll look into it and see, oh, did you do something significant enough? And if you're talking about an educator online who gets like 50 million views a month.
This is never going to happen.
No.
This is never
maybe
gonna
not
happen.
today, but let's say you continue to progress, and in like 10 years you have 150 channels, as you would, and then you're getting like 1 billion views per month, and you're educating the masses, and until you made business plays, I think you had a chance, but you'd ruined it. Like,
That's true.
that.
Yeah. Now I shit on stuff too regularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I also don't live in the UK, so.
Well, but you don't have to. British
definitely
citizenship, right? Still.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
and I think there's a chance because you're talking about you get nominated by enough people. There's already been a poll. Have you seen the poll? Google yourself. It comes up.
Oh God!
And there was actually a shocking number of votes to make
Google myself.
Simon Whistler a knight, which would be hilarious. I think it would be even more funny to have like Carl Smallwood, though.
Dude,
Like,
it would never happen. It'll never happen. I promise you.
yeah, but it could. And give knighthood to Simon Whistler for his work on educating and entertaining the people. Let's see, what is it? This one, I don't know if this is the one from before, but it's almost 1,500 signed things. And like, who even did that? Like, is not even mentioned anywhere. But that'd be funny. Sir Simon. And then you could, the most excellent order, you could just demand people always be like the most excellent order of the British Empire. But in any event, so yeah, the Queen, she can switch. She doesn't have to go with what the recommendation is. She can do whatever she wants for whatever branch or whatever that is put. There is one branch that's the Queen's own will, the Royal Victorian Order. She's the only one who can choose that one. It can't be recommended or whatever. But so that's kind of the general thing you'll get put in. And a lot of people don't know there's rankings within. You're not just like a knight. There's different rankings and stuff on there. And certain different grades on most of the orders. Not all the orders. Some of them don't. And also most of the time it's a knight or a dame, but there is one, the Order of the Garter and the Order of the Thistle both have knight or lady. Is sort of it's a single grade one, and just like if you're a guy or girl, so it's lady instead of dame. And then there was another one where the Knight Bachelor, which is only men and it's only knight, is the single grade. But there are rankings, and depending on the ranking, you can have different stuff. So if you're a low, like a commander, member, or companion or lieutenant of a lot of the orders, you can't call yourself sir or dame or whatever but you can append like OBE for Officer of the Order of the British Empire to your name, but you can't be a sir, which is sort of sad.
This is all very familiar to me.
Yeah.
This is
you can't be that's like sad because in the end of the day.
Well, they're lower ranks. They can give you one later. Like you're not.
Yeah.
It's very rare for someone to be just KBE, the knight rank immediately. It's like you'll get an OBE, then you might get a CBE, then you'll get a KBE.
Yeah.
Like it's not all at once.
But that's just because it turns out that this is really the only benefit you get from being knighted, is that you get to call yourself a sir, dame, or lady. I mean, these people don't even get to do that. So yeah, that's sad. I don't know. That's like the fun of it. But yeah, so
well, it's still like very
prestigious.
It's still very like it's quite an honor to
it is
like even get an OBE.
It is, and you do have some cases like like Bill Gates, KBE, he was knighted or whatever.
Yeah, but he can't call himself a sir
He
because
can't
he's not British.
unless he changes his citizenship or gets
He becomes British.
or he gets dual
Sure.
citizenship, and then he is allowed to then use the thing. And his wife also, Melinda Gates, is also she's a dame or would be if she became a UK citizen of some sort. But so yeah, and on that note, a lot of people don't know foreigners can be knighted for if they do something sufficient to qualify, or the Queen considers, or whoever nominates. But yeah, that's basically all you get is like sir or dame, and you do get a raised profile, like you say, it's like an honor. But given that most people who are knighted, I mean, for the most part, tend to already have kind of a raised profile, at least within their industry, if not the wider world, it doesn't really do a ton there either. So because they kind of already have that. But yeah, so and do you get? So we didn't. I don't think we ever really talked about in ancient times. Like, did you get anything back then? I don't think we really mentioned any monetary benefit, and no, like it's never been the case that you really got anything for it, monetarily or whatever, for being knighted. So like as the Royal Collection Trust notes, so since anyone granted the title of knight would, to quote them,
be expected to have the financial ability to support the honor of knighthood so that he could provide himself with arms, armor, houses, and the required number of armed followers to render military service to his sovereign for a minimum period each year.
Yeah, so you didn't really get
so
anything.
So it's like, yeah, if they're making you a knight, you don't need money.
Yeah. And so, well, and back then, if you're a knight, you can kind of like a low-level noble at the least. And so you can kind of rape and pillage and get all the money from that.
Well, it's kind of, it's like, when you start getting free stuff, you don't need the free stuff anymore.
Yeah, if you're really famous.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Not even really famous. Like, we get a ton of sponsorship stuff.
That's true.
And like companies sending me stuff. And I'm like, this is cool, but like this would have been way cooler 5 years ago. Now I'm just like, yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
The endless unopened boxes.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But one historical advantage though, if you were a knight, that isn't so much a thing today. Well, I guess it could be to some extent. So if you're captured in battle and you're a knight back then, you generally, they wouldn't kill you. Like if you're like a general plebeian, yeah, they're just slaughtering you. You're dead. But if you're like a knight, they're like, all right, we'll ransom you back. And so, and this is the same, but you didn't actually have to be a knight today. If you just were very obviously wealthy, they would just ransom you back, because it's sort of funny to think about, because it was all the lower level people who were like, fighting the battles for these wealthy people to sort of, for their more lands and all this. And then the wealthy were just like, they just get captured rather than killed, quite often. And then we just ransom them back. Whereas the plebeians like, no, slaughter them. Like they're just cattle.
Look, I mean,
yeah. But even, I mean, today,
there's no argument there. It's definitely better not to be a peasant in the past. Yeah. We discussed this many times in the medieval series. You don't want to be a peasant.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you don't want to be in the past. You definitely don't want to be a peasant in the past.
You don't want to be anything in the past, basically.
No, but definitely not peasants.
Even today, if you're a knighted person and like you get captured by some, I don't know, you're in North Korea or something, I would think the British would take more issue to that than like a random citizen, because it's a little higher profile, probably make the news, and then they got to do something about it a little more. So I think there's probably still some like added protection there, one would think, but it's just less likely. To happen. And
I like to think if I was captured, they'd be like, "Oh shit, Simon, YouTuber,
like that
captured.
one time
we gotta rescue him."
That's the one time you went to China and they told you, then they didn't let you bring your film gear or whatever or something like that.
Yeah. I had to fill out a form, when you get a visa for somewhere, and they're like, "What's your occupation?" I was like, I always write advertising because it's technically true and it doesn't draw attention. Yeah. And I guess they Googled me or something, because they were like, "Tell me what you really do," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they were just like, "Please don't make any films in our country." And I was like, "Okay."
It was quite disappointing too, because we wanted to do one on that city. There was like a city of some sort that's like.
Yeah, we definitely didn't, and we didn't discuss doing that, and that never happened.
Yeah, we were not going to ever do that. It was never in the plan.
No, we definitely weren't. There were no plans that ever were in place.
Yeah.
I have to edit that out.
Yeah. So, well, if you ever want to go back to China, which you've been there already, what do you want to go back again? So, yeah.
I don't like writing countries off in their entirety.
Yeah.
I can definitely never go to North Korea. I used to want to go to North Korea. Just because I thought it'd be interesting. I can definitely not.
No, that wouldn't work out for you. But if you got knighted at some point, you went, then it could be boost your profile.
No,
then
I'd still be murdered.
Make the news. But
still murdered.
So yeah, so in the early going though,
the shit I've talked about.
It's funny because King Henry VIII changed so much in British history, like so many of the way things work, like the church and all this, but like so many other things. But he also changed. He was the one who changed it. So he was then the only one who could knight people, and that's why the queen is the one to knight, or she can appoint someone to knight in her stead. But like this became, it was the monarch was now the only one who could knight people, because before that, if you were just sufficient rank of like of a nobleman or like a captain of the guard or this sort of thing, you could make other people knights. That was the thing people could do until King Henry VIII in England, and he decided only he got to make knights, which made for really good political benefits for him, because he could, he got to be the one to make everyone knights and stuff. So well, that works out for him having that power. But so the act of knighting itself, so historically we talked about before, like you have all this ritual bathing and all this and stuff, and presumably everyone bathes nowadays before they go and dresses up and everything. But so nowadays what actually happens, the actual process, you go there, they put a little thing like a pin on your shirt beforehand, and so that when the queen, you go there, she will give you this medal signifying your rank, and the pin, basically she gets to hang it from that, and that's the first thing. And if you're just one of these lower orders, that's really all that happens. So you have that's pretty much it. But if you're going to be an actual like full-on knight or dame, then you also get the little shoulder touch with the sword, where usually start the right and the left on top of the medal thing, and this is your little dubbing. And note here, she does not say, as is common in a lot of media, where she'll be like, "Rise, sir, so-and-so." She doesn't say anything. Sometimes she'll just talk and joke around with the people, but like there's nothing official being said, or she might not say anything at all. Or whoever, if she appoints someone to knight you instead, like they might not say anything. But so, and also if you just get the medal, like I said, you're not allowed to be a sir or a dame or call yourself that. It's quite unfortunate. It's like the one cool thing. And everything's like still ritualistic a little. There's the knighting stool, which is like an official thing. I think it's like a century old or something like that, and immaculately maintained, but it's the same stool, and that's what you kneel on and whatnot. And the queen uses her sword, her personal sword, which was the sword of her father before George VI, when he served as the colonel of the Scots Guards. So she uses that. That's her personal weapon. She's the only one who gets to use that sword, even if she...
Awesome, she has a personal weapon.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
a sword.
They all do that night, because they have to have their own sword. So she can appoint someone to, and then they have to use their own sword. And so this is a funny story.
Wait, the knights really get swords?
No, the ones who are dubbing them, like the dubbing. So the ones she appoints to make knights. Okay. So yeah, that's the disappointing thing. You don't even get a sword. Like, I think that should actually be a thing. Like, you should definitely get a sword, like a custom sword that has like some sort of...
Didn't what's his face? Didn't Terry Pratchett, when he got knighted, he made a sword for himself?
He had one. Yeah. He had one forged. And I think, that's even more fun, I think, would be to forge it yourself. Would be pretty cool. Your own sword or whatever.
I get the feeling if you're a knight, you're probably busy.
Yeah.
Like writing books,
or
like, I don't know, saving the world.
And he was funny because he actually lamented. So he had this sword made, but you're not allowed to carry it in the UK. He can't carry a sword around.
Oh yeah, you can't carry anything over 3 inches, I think it is.
Yeah, he's literally a knight, and I think there should be an exception in the law. If you're knighted, you're probably not going to go on a rampage, so you're safe. But like, you should be allowed if you're an official British
who goes
knight.
on a rampage with a sword?
Yeah, but like, he should be allowed to carry that sword. That should have been like an exception. Just because he's a knight, he gets to. But speaking of the sword, so Princess Beatrice once. This was a news item that they denied. Everyone involved denied it for a few years. And then it came out that no, that is actually what happened. So she jokingly likes to take, her father, Prince Andrew's sword, his ceremonial sword, the official one, and like jokingly knight people at parties. That's like a thing she does.
I love this.
Yes.
It's such a great story.
Yeah, so she jokingly knighted James Blunt, but she was swinging the sword around when she was doing it, and she accidentally slashed Ed Sheeran's face, and almost took his eye out. And so he got the cut. And then afterwards, they all like, no, that's not how he hurt himself at the party. But then later, Ed Sheeran started to go back on that, and then his manager, Stuart Camp, was like, yeah, that's exactly what happened, and they were quite upset.
They should have embraced that from day one. It's such a cool story.
It is.
You're like, yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but I think because they're a royal family, it doesn't make Princess Beatrice like sort of like drunkenly waving the sword around, the official sword, and like knighting people.
I think it makes her sound cool.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, so all right, we've already covered that part, and yeah, so you don't get a fiefdom, peasants, nothing. I feel like you should get like some land and like a sword. That should be just a thing. It's not going to be super expensive. They don't, not knighting people every 2 seconds. That should be added to the title just for fun. But yeah, it turns out.
Completely agree.
Yeah. While it is a great honor, it turns out about 2% of people who are officially deemed worthy and they can be knighted, reject it for whatever reason, about 2%. And so this is not public record, really, and there are reasons why it usually isn't, but we do know some, like comedian John Cleese. He rejected and famously said he was more honored having a lemur, the Avi Cleese, named after him. That's kind of a... And David Bowie.
Wait, what is that?
I don't know. He just has some sort of lemur that...
Oh, a lemur.
Yeah. Oh, that's how you would say.
Isn't that? It's a
Lemur?
type of cat or something? Isn't it like an animal?
Yes, you're correct. That's probably...
Yeah.
Yeah, and David Bowie wasn't...
Wait, maybe I might be my pronunciation.
No,
I don't know how to pronounce anything.
No, I'm pretty sure you're right. So yeah, so that one, and then David Bowie was another one who he turned it down twice. Twice David Bowie turned it down. Yeah.
I don't think you should be offered it twice, to be honest. If you turn it down once,
Yeah.
I feel like that should be like, no, you don't get it. You don't get a second shot at it.
Yeah, but he did, and yeah, most of the time when people turn it down, well, often it's not even known, but even when it is known, their reasons is usually not made public. But yeah, you can do, some people do like freedom of information requests and sort of sort this stuff out, and whatnot. So that is the process of being knighted, and you disappointingly, you get nothing really, and you definitely should get like a little cottage or something, and like a little something and a sword.
I don't know, man. Like being knighted's pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
Like I don't know. At least in the UK, at least my perception of it, it's like if you got knighted,
Yeah.
it's
No,
like that's pretty top notch.
Yeah,
like,
that's cool. As long as you get to be called a sir or a dame, I think that makes it way cooler. If you're just like the little, like your KBE or whatever, yeah. I guess it looks good on a resume.
Yeah.
If you're like applying for a job or something.
Yeah, but I don't imagine that many of them applying for jobs.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like once you get your knighted, you're not really putting together a resume.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah. All right, that is today's lengthy episode. And then we're gonna
Yeah, indeed, super lengthy.
Yeah.
So I'll just wrap it up and say thank you everybody for listening. If you made it all the way through, hero.
Yeah.
If you'd like to give us a review, yes, do that wherever you get your podcasts. When we get to 1,000 reviews on Amazon US, we're going to give a $1,000 Amazon gift card away to some lucky winner who left us a review. It doesn't have to be on on iTunes US. It's just that's what we're using as our benchmark. We'll go through all of the major platforms and dig someone out. So that is that. Check out, what did we plug today? Side projects, highlight history,
Fact Quickie, and
all of these things.
Ancient Marvels, which has nothing up, but also Fact Quickie, the videos that are up are nothing like the ones that are going to be up at some point soon.
Well, there you go. Thank you everybody for listening.
Mm-hmm.